All right, let's get started. Welcome everyone. For the second to last meeting of the year. Just a reminder that there is an at-large ballot out, so if anyone hasn't gotten their vote in, please do so. Before we approve the minutes, just want to note a couple of changes to the agenda. There was a bit of a mix-up with the new graduate curriculum, and I realized that we got the same batch of courses twice, a week apart, so we don't have to review those, so those have been taken out, and Linda will not be here today as well. So, do I have a motion to approve the minutes from 5:06?
I move we approve.
Second? Second? One item of discussion is, I think I forgot to forward it to you, but Amy Belcraft out of Castro sent me an email asking to have it amended, but she was not here as a guest. She was co-presenting with them on the IMS.
Well, does that make them not guests?
I don't know. She said she wanted to make it noted that she was.
They are guests. And it's a guest, not a senator, they're a
They're
guest.
not a senator, they're a guest. And when we
Right.
put Linda
I get what you said.
and Sue as guests. Who's not here?
Yes.
Then make it speak.
Maybe she wanted her name to be part of like.
Maybe that's what it is.
Oh, okay. And that is just copied from the agenda.
Okay.
Who seconded?
Precious. Any other discussion? All those in favor of approving minutes, please indicate so by raising your hand. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. All right, well, we'll go directly to you, Sue.
Sure. Sorry, I'm talking to my boss. Well, a couple of things. Obviously, you probably know that we received approval from the Board of Trustees on Thursday. Thursday afternoon, following the Finance Committee meeting for a range of tuition increases depending on the PUSF amount where we land with the governor's decision and the legislative decision. And, so that's all probably common knowledge, and I won't go into that. The University of Oregon today, after releasing information that they were going to sit at 11%, for an increase, has now backed off that position a little bit, and they've now released a range for tuition increases based on the PUSF. So we know that we have $40.5 million, that's been approved, and that's sitting there. There's been talk of $80 million in the halls of the Capitol, and then there's also talk of $120 million, which was the actual president's ask, the very bare minimum to keep us at current service levels. The HEC's recommendation was $186 million. We're nowhere near that at this point, but there is, and you all saw probably the revenue forecast and all the other things that were pretty optimistically received by folks up there. So we, at the OCOP meeting, the Council of Presidents meeting last Wednesday, Tina Kotek and Peter Courtney spent about a half an hour with the presidents. Some of us were on the phone. It was an interesting conversation. But the one piece of information that was helpful, even though they wouldn't be pinned down about an amount, they did let us know that they would have settled on an amount by the week of the 10th of June. That's important because we go to the HEC for our presentation about tuition increases on June 13th. So that's Thursday, the week of the 10th, not the 10th, but maybe it will be, is Monday, and that, doesn't help us a lot in terms of being adaptable and, pivoting and all that. But the good news is we've established our range. We didn't go in with a single percentage. Therefore, we have some flexibility, and we are sort of ahead of the conversation. Should it be 80, 120, or something more? At 120, we're at 8.5%. So we would still have to go before the HEC on the 13th because it's over 5%. You know, somebody could ask, is it possible to somehow figure out a way to get below 5? Yes, but it would require more cuts. Or lower fund balance. And we're very committed to keeping the fund balance where the board is comfortable, and that's 8%. And we're very mindful of what additional cuts will do to the institution beyond what we've proposed in our recommendation to the board last Thursday and now what they've approved. We are very lean, and we have a lot of good information that we presented on Thursday demonstrating that compared to national trends and averages, as well as our other public universities in Oregon. Yeah.
And I don't know if you know this too, but do the other state institutions have the same fund balance from their boards? Like, does OSU have an 8% recommendation?
Oh,
Or do they
no.
go lower, or do they?
OSU is in big double digits for their fund
It was like
balance.
60 something?
Yeah,
What about U of O?
No, U of O and OSU both have very strong, very healthy fund balances. Now, that's probably a combination of funding. It might not all be general fund, but they're in much better shape than we are.
But does their governing board recommend a certain
I'm
amount
sure they
too?
have a similar conversation. Yeah, I mean,
I'm
you know,
curious.
old OUS days, you never wanted to drop below 5.
Right.
10 was ideal. You know, the national recommendation from AGB is something like 25 or 30%. So, but we've made some investments, and you know,
Yeah.
and the board is on board, and I think 8% is pretty realistic for the things that we're trying to do right now. Yeah. So that's the update on the tuition. And I just thought it would be fun for you to see, I don't mean fun as in this is really a lot of fun to do, but it's fun to see what the students are doing around this, because they're showing up in the Capitol. I'm proud of them. They were up there for True Day. They're going back up for lobbying. But they also created these postcards, and they are sending them, thank you, to legislators on both sides of the aisle, and they're hand-signed by the students. So student government rallied a bunch of students to you know, personalize these. There's a message on the back about support from the state for higher education. It's well done. This is pictures of our students in various capacities, events, and you know, trips and things to make it just more personal. So I'll pass this around. These will go out. These will be given to Jean Stallman, who will take them to Salem. The last thing I'll say is, if you're inclined, you can reach out to your legislators. The speaker mentioned at the OCOP meeting last week that the next week and a half is really pretty critical for any kind of outreach or communication with your legislators. So I would just say that it sounds like there's a window of when this kind of communication would be more effective, and you might know more about this.
No, that's, you, they're on my information.
Sound about right?
Yeah.
Cards have been passed though for us to write messages. I don't know if
These are
everybody saw them.
Oh, I don't know about that. I don't know
They're
what-
just blank cards and writing
Oh,
a
good.
message to.
And where did those come from?
Well, the one I filled out was from Barbara Hansen.
Okay, so it sounds like there's some movement on that. But. So that's it, and I can answer any questions if you have any. Oh, sorry, that was a trick.
And I would say if you would like to write a message and you haven't seen those cards, please contact Barbara. She's the division chair for Humanity and Culture, but she's also the head of the union.
SCA.
Yeah, so please contact her.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, I'm sorry I went a little long.
Oh, no problem. Mary?
Well, most of what we discussed is on the agenda, the task force, so I won't go into that. As far as, I mean, some of you are maybe waiting with so much impatience for the call for membership on committees. That's coming soon. We're hoping to have it out Thursday. It will be from Paul's email address. And we're waiting on the equivalencies that the administration has established as far as ELUs for various committee participation, depending on the weight of these committees, time-wise and work-wise. And so we hope to have that before the call goes out, but if we don't have it by then, the call will still go out. And if we have to make changes, if somebody says, well, I'm not interested in being on this committee anymore, if it's only so many ELUs or fraction of an ELU, then we'll just change the document as needed, and we'll keep you updated. But it should be out on Thursday for you to pick some assignments. Yes.
Could you clarify how the equivalency of the ELUs were done
So
succinctly?
the committee went to the various chairs of the committees to ask them, and that's actually a document that's going to come out with the call for membership. So we got from the chairs how many hours they estimated were spent per term preparing for the committee, being in the committee, what the chair's extra duties and times were in case anybody wanted to be chair of one of those committees. And based on that summary of these hours and tasks, I think it was Sue's office or Jody's or Karen's.
Jody and I have both served on those committees for a number of years. Just triangulated it a little bit and looked at, whether that looked reasonable from the chairs, or should it be more based on our experience or less. So the idea was just to try to
Get us some estimate.
like little intercoder reliability going, and then I'll throw it back to you. Thank you.
Okay, so at some point, Jody was going to meet with the various chairs, but then I think it was decided that if the numbers that I provided looked a little bit like what they had already kind of guesstimated, then they wouldn't meet with the chairs. But I'm not sure what happened in the end with that, if you did meet
No, they
individually
didn't.
with the chairs.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
that was exactly what happened. We thought we should probably have a meeting on the books just in case there seemed to be need for additional conversation, but the numbers didn't seem to be completely, or in any way at all divergent.
Yeah,
And
they were
we
very
all,
similar.
I think, can appreciate not having another meeting when we have the opportunity to have another meeting. So we canceled the meeting.
Okay, because I did ask you about that, but I didn't have that, so I didn't know if
Shocking.
things were still
I've
shocking.
been getting that to all of
Just
my
thought I'd
email
throw
lately.
that
I
in.
can't believe
But-
it fell off of your radar. Sorry about that, Marianne.
Well, I would rather say it's your fault than mine.
Oh, no. But it is my fault.
So anyway, that's what's happening with that. Hopefully the numbers will match. And I would just say, just as a tiny little addition, that I know you served for many years, the two of you on many committees, but I also think that some of them are changing a little bit in breadth and effort put into certain problems that might come up.
So can I just say that this is not written in stone? We have to try to start somewhere, and without something more scientifically available, this is just a starting point. I'm going to be absolutely open to any kind of back and forth that we need to have that reflects what you're suggesting. Changing committees, changing workload on the committee, all of those things are absolutely possible.
So when the message comes out, the request for membership, it will also explain or remind those of you who are professional on the professional track that you need to get permission, or at least discuss it with your chair, and then your chair will discuss the possibilities with Sue, as she is the one who grants the ELUs for those committees.
Dennis?
I appreciate, Sue, your comments about it's a work in progress perhaps in the first effort, because things have changed a lot. There are different views on people's participation, or it's a small sample that you might have had design that. Going forward, this applies mostly to professional track, most immediately, right?
Only
professional.
Okay, the counting of ELUs, but I would maintain that it has professorial implications for promotion and tenure. So when committees have established hours of commitment, then maybe we're getting to that conversation we've had over the years of, are all committees equal? And we know that that's not true, but they're not equal. They might be equal in the eyes of a faculty personnel committee. So this list, as it's proposed, or now going forward, will be probably used in that process as well. So it requires a little bit more, I think, development.
Any other comments?
I would just say that the list that will go out with the number of hours provided by the chairs is also a work in progress, and you know, if in the future those committees change, so will those explanations and numbers.
All right, next up we have from Faculty Development Committee, the couple of different awards that need to be reviewed. Want to say anything about the process here?
Yeah, I'll comment a little bit about the process. I'll save longer remarks for the end of the year practice. But, so there's three things I think buried under this agenda item. The first is the Professional Development Grant Awards. That one's pretty straightforward. And then the two that happen only once are the Distinguished Teaching Award and then the Distinguished Service Award. And as per the charge, the Faculty Development Committee selects the Distinguished Service Award, and then somebody from the Faculty Development Committee chairs a larger Distinguished Teaching Award Selection Committee, which is made up of representatives from all 7 of the divisions. The Distinguished Service Awards, the committee is recommending 2 awards go to Margaret Perrow and Dennis Slattery. Congrats to them as they're watching the video. They know, they've been informed.
Should know before they get.
And the Distinguished Teaching Award, 2 awards, one to Precious Yamaguchi, and the other to Emily Reeder in psychology. So there'll be more remarks on the merits of those applications, those nominations at the end of the year breakfast.
Brett, could you, the guidelines that went out for the calls for nominations for both of those awards were pretty clear about all the different stages.
Yes.
For those who might
Let's
be
talk about
interested on the professional development grant side, how does the committee evaluate the proposals? Can you say a little bit about?
Oh, for the professional development grant.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I thought you were going to go with the Distinguished Teaching Awards. That selection should have happened in the winter term, so we had a lot of delays in that process, and so that's what I thought you were going. The Professional Development Grant Awards. This is probably a good thing to bring back to your constituents. Professional Development Grant. That pot of money seems to be more well funded. It's more full than, say, the Carpenter One Awards that we did earlier a month or so ago. The Carpenter One Awards, I believe, rough numbers off the top of my head, about 20% of all the requests there was available funding for, whereas the Professional Development Grant on this round was more like 65–70%. We were able to achieve 65–70% of the requests for that one. There was over $90,000 requested, and we had maybe $65,000 available for it, roughly. Generally, the process for all these have been pretty consistent across the Carpenter One, Carpenter Two, and the Professional Development Grants. The committee, of which there are 6 members, I want to say, review the packets for about a week ahead of time and score them individually. Each committee member ranks them individually, their appropriateness of the budget presentation, the impact or benefit to SOU, and merits of the proposal in general. And so then we come together and we look at how that's laid, how that kind of plays out. And generally, it's a function of who's on the committee in terms of the style of how thinly to slice awards, right? $1 here, getting that level. The preference this year has generally been looking at a little bit more categorically where there's been clearly a few top scoring applications, and then the majority fall kind of in this middle, and then the lower one maybe missing the mark on clarity, that wasn't communicating very well to all the committee members, etc. And so from there, decisions get made depending on how much funding is available to help achieve more full funding for that top tier, and then the middle tier and the lower tier. So I would say for the professional development grant, the majority are in that middle tier. I can look at notes and see what went unfunded in there.
So yeah, thank you for, that's actually quite a bit of information. And I was just sort of doing some rough math on these. It looked like the majority of them got a roughly 2/3 funding, and a couple got nearly full funding, and a couple got only half funding. And should we take from that that was mostly decided on merits, or were there some cases where if they didn't get the funding, they couldn't do it at all? Or I mean, I'm just kind of curious.
So there's several pieces that go into it. Not all of them fit into a rule that we abide by. If there's a project that is, say, requesting $7,000 versus one that's $700, it's probably much more likely that the 700 is going to get fully funded instead of at 70%, right? And so,
Sure.
so there's a little bit of that when it comes to that fine tuning. Sorry, my brain is kind of only half firing today. Ask me again, Kimball, so I can.
Well, I just want, I mean, you started to answer the question about if I were to take, you know, the right number and divide by the left number, I would come up with about 0.65 in most cases, but it's a little bit less in some and a little bit more in others, and you were trying to explain how that might have happened.
Right. Okay, thank you. Now I'm back on track here. This may not be the only time this happens. There was maybe one or two applications that explicitly stated if this isn't funded at a certain level or these prioritized, then the project can't happen. I'd say that's more rare than common that we have that information from the application.
Right.
It's nice to have, and so I'm thinking at least of one that would say, if this isn't funded, I'm not going to do it. And then there are several others that prioritize, maybe they have travel or summer stipend or certain expenses with publication and transcription or something, and they will prioritize them, and that helps the committee to draw a more appropriate line instead of just saying, all right, we're going to fund 65% of this middle tier. And so we do pay attention to them when we have that information.
That's great, thank you.
Can I ask? So that information is not required, though?
No.
So if somebody just...
There's no line on the application that asks explicitly.
Right.
However, it does ask for clarification
Clarification
on the budget and
Okay.
justification for it. And so
And
it
in
is
the right
asking
way.
for as much specificity as you can provide. I think that's there.
We talked in private a little bit about it, and I'd like to make sure that I understood it and that others understand it. The Carpenter One used to be just for people furthering their education, be it getting a PhD or just studying something in an academic setting, but then it was open to those who just went into a different field from their original studies as undergrads and grads. But I don't believe it's, and you said that now, because of the origin of the Carpenter One, priority is given to those who are pursuing their education. But I don't think it says so in the explanation of what the Carpenter Grant One is. And so I'm wondering, is it just something that this particular group decided, or is it just a common thing that we should all know?
Well, I think maybe some with more institutional historical knowledge may be better able to comment on what the sentiment of past committees has been and even the origins of Carpenter One. But there is a sense that historically Carpenter One, as you said, was originally intended for what I'll call retooling, right, or continuing your education if you don't have a terminal degree. That is open to advances in new areas of new scholarship. And so that is a question that comes up for the committee each time is, what's retooling in terms of education? There are occasional applications that do request for terminal degree, costs associated with achieving a terminal degree. And there are others that are more clearly retooling by attending like a workshop or a new skill set acquiring of that. And then there's others that are kind of just branching off into a new area of scholarship, right? And so the committee has been aware, has parsed those a little bit of the retooling, and they are not the majority of applications. And this particular, the makeup of the committee right now has prioritized those applications for Carpenter 1. So, I'm sure if that's answering every aspect of your
Well,
question.
okay.
So we're running behind, and Carpenter 1 isn't on the table today, so can we come back to that another time? So we do need to, I do have a request to waive the 2-week rule. Again, one of the reasons this comes up for the awards like this, of course, in the case of the teaching and service awards, the cat's probably out of the bag for some of these folks, and I'd like to probably know that it's for real, an award, and not just something that people are talking about in a room somewhere, so we'd like to get them that news as soon as possible. And of course, for the professional development grants, people like to know when they're getting money as soon as possible for the research. So what I'm hoping is that maybe we can get a motion to waive the 2-week rule on all 3 of these, and then we can vote to approve on each one separately. Do I have a motion to waive the 2-week rule on the 3 pieces from the Faculty Development Committee? Brian is first. Do I have a second? Cool. All right. Any further discussion on that? All those in favor of waiving the 2-week rule on the Faculty Development Committee's proposals, please indicate so by raising your hand. Any opposed or any abstentions? No abstention? Okay. All right, motion passes. All right, do we have a motion on the, let's go in the order that it's in the box, to the Distinguished Teaching Award winners? Motion to approve teaching, all right.
I move it.
Okay. You have a second? And Brian? All right. Any further discussion on teaching award winners?
I have a question that doesn't relate to the vote, but it relates to the teaching awards, so maybe right after the vote.
Okay.
Please, I'm hoping to be recognized.
Okay. I will.
I a question on procedure. We're accepting the recommendation of the committee to make these awards. I mean,
Yes.
it's our decision,
Yes.
even though they did all the work.
Thank you.
Imagine that.
This is a formal thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Any further discussion? Okay. All right, all those in favor of approving the recommendations for the teaching award winners, please indicate so by raising
It's precious, like a half a vote.
your hand. Yeah, she first. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, that motion passes. Would you like to?
After, if you want
After
to
all,
yeah,
okay.
thank you.
Do you have a motion to approve the service award nominations?
Seconded.
All right.
Trying to see your name.
Any further discussion on
I
that?
just wanted to go forward.
All those in favor of approving the recommendations for the service award winners, please indicate so by raising your hand.
I find myself in the minutes even when I'm not here.
All right. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Enrique, did you abstain on that one?
I voted.
Oh, you voted in the last minute.
Oh, we did? I missed it. Okay.
All right, that motion passes. And finally, a reminder, if you are one of the recipients of the professional development grants, you should probably abstain. Do we have a motion to approve the professional development grant recommendations? Carol? Oh.
Not yet.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the recommendations for the professional development grants, please indicate so by raising your hand. And any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, Brian, Jess, and Mark. All right, thank you, the motion passes. Dennis?
In the past, I've lobbied Sue personally and openly about, here at the meeting, about having a distinguished award for research. I think, I mean, maybe all of these awards fulfill that sort of role, but, you know, in terms of, like, say, what we're expected to do as faculty, research, service, and teaching, I'm proposing, I don't know what the process is to get that, either through the faculty development committee or yourself from your
It's a
office.
very long
To get an extra award, because these proposals that are in the development are outstanding and interesting. And so maybe we could provide a distinguished award. Maybe it doesn't necessarily have to go with this group, but it's excellent, the way these folks have put forward their proposals, in my opinion. Right?
Last year when I presented the Distinguished Teaching Award and Service Award to Faculty Senate, I believe it was Kimball that made the exact same comments, and here we are 12 months later. So I just want to be on the record and note that it's been persistently
So,
brought up.
Can
but
I
it
ask
would
if
be
anyone's
awful.
working on that? Because I've not heard any
No,
from any
that's my
faculty.
point, is I don't
Yeah.
think
So-
any.
Well, I've just mentioned it in the past, and I think it didn't go anywhere, but I wasn't pushing it either.
So I was involved with Hala. So Hala Shutman is the impetus behind both the teaching and service award, and I was on the committee with her. And it was a very long process because we brought it forward a number of different
Well, we were
governing-
building it essentially from
Right, we were
scratch.
building it from
Yeah.
scratch, and it had its moments of, you know, us being clear on things, and the timelines were unwieldy in some cases, and all that kind of stuff, but now that the framework is there, any of you can bring forward a proposal, but you need to work it through. We brought it to APSU, we brought it to Senate, we brought it to the administration, we kept making changes, and then we, when the committee, the professional development committee, we went to them, and we explained to them because they were doing the work. So that was a big deal, so you might not want, you have to be cognizant of that.
Well, they
You're asking
evaluate,
another committee to go.
these professional development.
I know, but the actual teaching awards and the service things required the, you know, getting all the documentation in for the teaching, you have to go in as a person on that committee and watch people teach. So it's more time than you think. So, yeah, anybody can do it. You just have to put in a whole bunch of effort, and it probably took us, what, a year and a half to get it through and all the steps?
What
So-
is the first step? Where does it start?
Yes.
Started with our little heads, like, coming together and thinking
You
about.
as a self-formed committee, no one
Yeah,
charged you to
it
do
was
it.
me and Helen. And we sat out and thought about what we thought would be valuable for faculty, to recognize faculty. That's where it started. So this is definitely another.
Okay, my
You're
question, I guess my
interested in-
question is, those awards, or the funding for that comes out of the provost's office?
I pay for them.
Right, and we had to
But,
go through the
um,
administration, which we
But I
did.
don't create the process
Right,
because
I
it comes
mean-
from here.
And the
So-
administration was very
You
supportive.
would need to
You see it as
establish
a-
the criteria and propose what that set of criteria would be.
So you're not opposed to it?
I've never been opposed to
No.
it,
She
but
was very supportive.
I wasn't opposed to these two awards. In fact, I think I was pretty on board the whole time,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
I didn't create them.
Right.
I supported them, and I financially do.
I think there
And
generally
we
would
buy
be
the
a lot of
plaques
support
and
for it.
all that.
Right.
I'm sorry, Brett?
I think there generally would be a lot of support for it, given the feedback I hear
Yeah.
in my role with
Yeah.
the other two.
It just seems like it lines up with what other things we're asking faculty to do, to emphasize, equally emphasize the research phase of
Yeah.
their
So here's my
professional life.
suggestion. You talk to Helen Shutman, because because she's super organized and she kept all the notes and the process and
I
then
will
you
do
kind of
so.
get a, and then have a task.
And copy you.
Now, wasn't it task force, it was,
So do the funds for the special development come out of your office also?
I'm not sure I understand the
You're
question.
going to the union contract.
the union.
Oh, the union contract.
Yeah, the PDG is bargained.
Right.
It's in the contract, as are the PDA funds.
All right, we need to move on, but I think we're all in agreement, that's a great idea. All right, next up, do we have a motion to approve the faculty bylaws proposed on the 6th? Those are changes to the academic
You
policy.
skipped something,
I did skip something?
yeah.
New graduate.
New
proposal.
No, I
graduate
scratched
proposal.
that. Oh, you don't have your laptop. I said at the beginning of the meeting that I scratched that from the agenda, because there is some confusion over, they were the same courses.
So we're gonna see the last meeting?
No, we're not gonna see them again. We already approved them. We got a batch of courses
Right.
twice from grad council, but they were actually the same courses. The titles were slightly different on the
Oh, okay.
documents.
That way they look familiar?
Yes,
Oh.
that's why we were all confused last time. We were all confused last time because we voted to approve and then we started discussing another batch. We were all, remember there was like confusion, like what's happening? So we scratched those. So do we have a motion to approve the bylaws revisions to academic policies committee language and adding the SSCs to the other other committees? Any motion?
Okay.
All right.
Okay, make the motion.
Anyone second? Precious? Any further discussion on these changes?
Are we doing, I've got a question, are we doing all of the bylaw changes from the APC and the language?
Well, that was the motion.
Okay,
Um,
all right, I didn't,
You want to parse it out?
They're, they're all
No,
kind of, they're pretty
ready.
simple
Downward County.
changes.
Yeah.
All right, all those in favor of approving the changes to the proposed changes to the bylaws on academic policies? Any others? Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, motion passes, thank you. All right, Dale, you're here for new university studies proposals?
Yes, there's 5, these are going to be the final ones for the year. Most of these were probably really well vetted more than any other things because their first attempt didn't go through. Every proposal had a representative come to university studies to talk about it and rewrite the proposal, so by the time they ultimately went through, they went through really well. The only one you see a slight not unanimous was the biology 384, and that was a 311, and the only reason that was a little bit different is the syllabus on paper wasn't as well done as the explanation in person. So, but it looked good in the big picture. So any questions? You're not coming up for vote tonight.
Right, this will come up in our last meeting, but if there are questions, it'd be good to.
Well, I still have that persistent question about having affiliated faculty propose hard-numbered courses. But I don't think you can answer that question.
We don't have a.
We have nothing in place that's stipulated, that's fine and dandy, and the kind of the take-home has always been, well, they talked to the department about it. Well, it was not quite, it was that way, but there were some caveats to that, and it happens to be my department, so,
Right.
that is, in my opinion, disconcerting to have somebody who's temporarily here for another particular reason, proposing
We actually, and this, we're talking about the 2 biology courses.
biology.
And we actually talked about the possibility of saying, courses approved until that person leaves and then it would have to be resubmitted.
Right.
And we could put that as a trailer, but it was just like, God, it felt like micromanagement.
It's also not, I mean, this is a curriculum, and it's an
Yeah.
assessment of the suitability of the learning outcomes according to, so I was happy to see that that wasn't the case, because that's
We
not
just
really in the
talked
purview
about
of this
it, you know.
committee.
But, and that quite honestly, is kind of a strange thing because we have courses go up all the time where it's proposed by one person and then 3 years down the road it's taught by somebody else. And there's no assessment necessarily of that unless it comes into a 5-year review. And then only if that person decides to submit something, because we don't have any teeth to say you submit or else we will shoot you death. Yeah, so it's kind of, we have situations like that, I think, that just goes to happen, where not the person proposing is the person teaching 5 years out. And so.
So just to follow up on what you said, Dale, if a course goes through a 5-year course review and there's no application that comes forth, it just stays there?
You know
So
that.
once it's
You
in,
know the answer
I didn't know
to
if there's been changes for 2 years.
That was a good lawyer question. You didn't ask a question that you didn't know the answer to.
Well, I didn't know if things changed, committees changed, we've had that
Yeah.
discussion earlier, and so I just didn't know if,
No, it is one of the issues with the university studies curriculum.
hence why at the end, there's a general education task force, perhaps, to be. Okay, sorry.
No, it's a point well taken, and I think it probably is something that would be well.
I mean, to be honest with you, if the changes, it should be reviewed at least, because we're doing a disservice to all of the students if the original intention of the class was for these upper level integrations.
And it's not
And
that
it's
way
been
anymore.
so long that people have no idea what it is and what the expectations are, or have even reviewed
Right.
university studies expectations for each one of those strands, that they're not actually receiving the proficiencies of the strands or the
Right.
goal of the strands.
And that, I
so.
think that's more likely to happen if you bring in a temporary faculty member who's filling in to teach some of these types of courses, and where are they gonna get that information if there's not a lot of communication with an outgoing faculty member? And they're kind of making it up.
Hannah?
I might have just missed this because I was typing, but I was under the impression that after a certain amount of time that the university studies, they were re-looked at.
Yes, we
Is that what
ask,
You asked
we
for them.
ask for them, and then we
And you
don't
don't
always
just
get
say
them.
no if they don't listen? You're
Um,
not on it anymore?
You know, so that's,
Okay.
don't ask me what I'd
I'm
like to
typing.
do, or what I think, I shouldn't say what I would
Okay.
like to do, but what the committee would like to do, but there should be, those courses should actually be resubmitted, you know, when they're up for like a renewal.
Yeah.
I mean, it's only fair, and it goes right back to your question.
Because my department, we were talking about this, and they had said that our Gen Chem class had come back up, and that we had gone back through the process, so I was under the impression that that was how it worked for all the classes, that they went back up and got reapproved for
You
being.
called for that.
Yeah.
So if it's okay. Yes, we do a review every 5 years based on our charge from this body, from the Faculty Senate. We are a Faculty Senate Committee. And so that was in our report 2 years ago, our final report, which is located on the Faculty Senate website under committees.
Okay.
And I also review it again because we've grown so much since then. The last 2 years, we've added so many university studies courses. So the question really becomes, and it also gives the program an opportunity to say, oh, by the way, we don't teach that course anymore, so let's take it out of DegreeWorks and off of the website so students aren't waiting for it to come around. So we try to clean it up. For the programs that did not resubmit on time or during the 5-year window, we will nudge and ask them, but we can't remove them at this point because that's not in our charge or purview to remove them from university studies. That would be a conversation, I believe, that would start here and maybe trickle up to the provost office, if that's something that you want to see. Janet is on the table, so maybe we wait and see, but.
I have a question for Jody and maybe Larry that's kind of related. In undergraduate curriculum committee, we talked about, both last year when I was on the committee and at that first meeting that I had with you all, about the idea of publishing learning outcomes that are approved with catalog descriptions so that students and incoming teachers, such as adjuncts or replacement teachers, could see that information. Has there been any more discussion about that?
No, but I think, you know, I mean, it's certainly still part of what we're thinking about, and we need to, we've just gotten through our last set of curriculum. So coming back to some of those, we timed perfectly so that we will do it right at the end of the term, and we won't probably get to it till next year. Right. Nonetheless, I think that, you know, we're just starting to prepare materials for the call for programs to submit new curriculum and catalog changes for next year. So this is the ideal time to be having those conversations, and there's going to be some additional discussion as well about what else should come forward. So yeah, short answer is yes, we still are holding that, and no, we haven't done anything about it.
Well, are there any other questions for Dale, or is this a good transition for our undergraduate curriculum?
I guess I want to add one more thing though. I don't want people going away from here thinking that university studies is sort of this uncontrolled beast that's running wild with no oversight, because that's not true, first of all. The committee does that, Lee does that, and we do that as an institution with our accreditation reporting, because don't forget that we're talking about outcomes that are connected to our core themes. So I want folks to kind of keep that all in mind, that it's actually a fairly well-governed process, but what we don't have is that mechanism to remove courses from the catalog if we feel that they don't, or remove that designation, and that's something that this, you know, that we should probably look at, but just want to make sure that we all have the same understanding.
I think point well taken.
Thank you. Right back at you.
All right, thank you, Dale.
Thanks.
All right, Larry, are you here to talk about?
Yes, I am. So we had a number of courses to look over, and a nice assortment from education, chemistry, a few from military science, one from SOAN. This is for discussion, so if you've got questions, and if I don't know the answer, I can just gather it up and pass it along to those more knowledgeable.
Can I ask a question because of chemistry faculty?
Oh, this is perfect.
So, I'm just curious, so is your chemistry proposal, are those new courses? Like what
So
happened to
one-
100, 101?
So 104, 101 still exists. 104, 105, 106 is what nursing majors that used to go to OHSU
Right,
had
right,
to
I
take.
get it.
They lost it, now it's still suggested. RCC teaches it, we don't, we want to bring it back.
I
And
get
we
it.
want to make
So
it
that
more.
was the nursing
Yes.
chemistry that used to
Yes,
exist years
so
and
I'm
years
gonna
ago.
go, I'm gonna teach it next
Okay.
winter and go off of Lynn's. Lynn's given me all her stuff.
Right.
So
I was
build
just
from
curious
there.
which one it was.
Yeah.
Now it makes sense.
Any other questions? All right.
No, fine.
Sorry, I had to think. So, at least Dale, I know, hi. So some of these, sociology of sport, I think came up last time, and we approved that for a university studies course.
Yes.
But it's not even an approved course, right? now.
Sometimes they come out of order.
Okay.
It doesn't, so it doesn't mean that university studies can offer it even.
Well, yeah, I understand that, but it just seems, it should be backwards, but I mean, I know being, I was chair of that, well, I guess last year, I can't remember, years go back.
2 years ago.
But all, it just, usually I know that we wouldn't actually review it until it was kind of further along in the curriculum process to be approved. Pardon?
Well, for the last couple of years, we've been a little slower at getting the curriculum committee classes to Senate. So both Jody and I sit ex officio on curriculum and university studies. So we'll hear it at university studies if it's already gone through curriculum committee. It just hasn't come to you yet. So it didn't move forward in university studies until curriculum committee had heard it and it was approved. We just got it to you before they did. Because we have a tendency to try to get on the agenda as we have a few courses versus a whole packet of courses. So we got here a little bit before they did. The course also, that particular one's being taught this summer as a $3.99, and the hope was they'd be able to get the designation for university studies on there so that enrollment would happen. It's just not going to be a hard number course till next fall. So that was part of the misalignment. And you caught that, which is very good. I'm very proud of you. But it was one of those things where sometimes you
And
get a
there
little
was
bit
a
above
lot
the-
of information this week, mind you.
Yes, there was.
Ryan read his. Any other
That's
questions?
it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you all. Moving on to the next thing, is Michelle Barlow here? Uh-oh. Is that? Jody, do you know, or Sue, are either of you
I
able
know
to,
she's not here.
either of you able to speak about the accessibility policies?
I can't. I don't know.
They told me it was urgent to put this on.
It must not be that urgent.
There's only one little tiny thing on one of them. It was in blue, which I assumed was the only change. I was kind of confused why they were there. There was no prep.
They didn't tell me, they just said it needed to come to us soon. And then
I
they-
can speak to that,
Okay.
because this has gone through,
Policy committee?
yeah. So this is part of the process by which, policies that may affect certain constituencies go to all of those constituencies, so it can be an opportunity for them to be revised prior to going out for public commentary and then signing off by the president. So these, I don't think they were very significant
Just
changes.
probably just a timing issue that was why it was really, really important.
Okay.
Yeah.
What had something to do with was the change in blue on there? It was about documents, it was about accessibility of electronic
I thought that was a
documents.
link.
It's a link.
I think it was just a link.
But it was a link to that thing, so it wasn't that there were any changes per se, was there?
We're applying a new set of guidelines, and part of that is in response to some notice that was provided to the institution about whether or not we were in compliance across all aspects of our operation. So this keeps
Okay.
us on track to be
Okay.
compliant with that schedule, and just it demonstrates to our community what
So we
we're.
never had this document before? That's what I can't figure out.
Well, they're draft 2015 and 2017 somewhere.
It's-
I apologize.
I was just confused.
Michelle asked me to put it on the last agenda, and then she couldn't make it and asked me to move it to this one, so I guess we move on.
I think we have drafts from previous years, but I don't think we've had this. Not this one, not the accessibility, but I think Michelle needs to speak with this, do this.
Okay, well, we'll reach out to her and see if she's coming next time. All right, next up we have the Student Evaluation of Instruction Task Force report.
Yes. Okay, so, Kristen's here too. So, yeah, I have a couple people in our students, I saw Brittany back there. So I have some of the people who were on the task force who are here today, and so jump in at any time, just raise your hand. And I thought I'd try to keep this brief, because I have, what, 10 minutes? Okay, so I'm gonna try to go through this quickly. I wanted to kind of give everybody an idea of what the task force did, and then what our findings were at the end of it. So you guys remember when we convened the task force, or we gave the charge to the task force in the fall, we started meeting in the winter term. We had a number of faculty from across different programs at the university, and we had one student member who is back in the back of the room, our president-elect of ASSOU, right? Yes, so she was representing the student voice extremely well at our meetings. We did a literature review, so we looked at the literature around student evaluations about bias and about effectiveness and about whether or not you can measure things like this, about best practices around student evaluations, a lot of different things. So we did a literature review, and we shared our results with each other and talked about them. We also did quite a bit of primary research, and for me personally, this is where it got really exciting because we were really involving a lot of different people in this process. We had Donna Lane did a survey with the IFS members of how student evaluations are used at different member institutions, and then I had 2 MBA students that were in Donna's class with Mark, that these 2 teams did they surveyed SOU, both faculty and students, about the use of our actual student evaluations here. So this was really cool, I thought, and that we found out what's going on at other institutions in Oregon, we found out the faculty and student perspective here, and we used that to look at how that aligned with all the things we've been reading about student evaluations. We found out from both the secondary research and the primary research that we did, some sort of overall general things, that overall there's a pretty wide consensus that there is significant bias in quantitative student evaluations of teaching. So this is bias about gender, about underrepresented groups, about even things like age and political views. I mean, there's bias in all different ways. Attractiveness is one that came up in quite a few studies as well. So charisma and sort of performativity, in the classroom and things like that can create bias. So there are all different ways that bias shows up in student evaluations of teaching, particularly when they're quantitative and focused on a limited number of kind of general overarching questions, as ours is. So there was widespread lack of confidence in the results, both by students and by faculty, and that's both here and in the IFS institutions and in the literature as well. So the students don't feel that their voices are heard in the evaluations sort of widely or not listened to. Faculty don't feel that they're reliable or providing useful information in many cases, and then there's a feeling, a pretty widespread feeling that there's bias as well. The link between student learning and the evaluations tends to be rather small, so that's definitely something we would like to improve. And then something that came out in quite a few of the studies, particularly that Kristen looked at, is that using one single question or item to assess teaching effectiveness is not really a widely acceptable practice for social scientific research. So relying only on one quantitative question for evaluating teaching effectiveness is not really the best practice, according to all these studies that we were looking at. So neither the students nor the faculty have reported that the evaluations are doing what they were supposed to be doing, which is providing reliable information for promotion and tenure decisions, and also giving instructors useful feedback on their teaching that they can use to improve their courses. So there are a growing number of institutions that are shifting their focus from evaluation of teaching to improvement of teaching. The University of Oregon in Oregon is sort of leading the way on this practice. They've made a lot of huge changes in the way they use teaching evaluations and the teaching evaluations themselves. And there's more about that in the report, and I'm going to be talking about that a little bit more as well. PSU is also now reevaluating how they use teaching evaluations and what types of teaching evaluations they use. And of course we are as well. So this is really active in Oregon. It's also really active in quite a few California institutions and elsewhere across the country. I don't want to dwell too much on the actual recommendations of the task force, but you are all free to read the report, and if you haven't already, and ask questions about it. Some of the kind of broad things that we looked at is that we do not feel that the current quantitative evaluation of teaching effectiveness based on one question is working for promotion and tenure decisions. So we don't think it should be used that way. We had quite a few ideas for ways to reduce bias in the questions by revising the questions and making them more qualitative, especially focusing on the learning experience of the students rather than on characteristics of the instructor. We also thought it was a worthwhile possibility of looking into having program-related questions alongside the sort of campus-wide questions about learning experience. So there might be some programmatic questions that would be more about learning outcomes for specific programs. So maybe some questions that would be campus-wide and more general, and some that are more program-specific. Matt Stillman said this was totally possible. He just would need to work with the programs to get those actual questions into the evaluation. And he said as long as they weren't revising them every term, he was fine with doing that. The instructors would then, we thought that looking at all the research we did, and particularly what U of Oregon is doing now with their evaluations, we thought it would be very useful for instructors to use the feedback they get from the student evaluations to write a reflection on teaching that responds to what the students are saying. The University of Oregon is doing something very similar, and they are having these new qualitative questions distributed, and then the instructor writes a response. So we thought it would be a little bit different from that, and that it would be a reflective piece that incorporates the student feedback rather than just having like the two sides. Instead, it would be a more integrated reflection, but it would definitely be based on the student feedback. This would be used, we thought, ideally, for promotion and tenure decisions, and it would replace that sort of quantitative score of like, 89% of the students voted in this category or this other category. We also made recommendations based on research about the instructions that are given to students, which also should help reduce bias. And there were some very interesting studies that have been done very recently about how different the evaluations turn out just when students are given specific instructions about eliminating bias. And that, the same questions going to two groups of students but with different instructions, having really different results. So that's very interesting research. It's in the report. We also looked at what some other institutions are doing. The University of Oregon is having an option for students to do evaluations in class and also get more sort of information about like what should be included and what shouldn't in evaluations. That might be worth looking at as well. We also are encouraging the use of midterm surveys as part of the whole teaching evaluation and teaching feedback process. University of Oregon is also doing that. Theirs are sent out campus-wide, I believe, or at least there's an option to do it campus-wide. Ours might be different. There might be an option to do one if you feel like it would be helpful. And then we're also recommending more frequent peer observation as another piece of this whole teaching feedback process. The University of Oregon is also doing more peer observation of teaching as well. The practices that University of Oregon is recommending is also in our report. It's really similar to a lot of the things that we're recommending, although their questions are a little different and the way they've kind of envisioned it is a little different. And they're also looking forward to some other things that are very, very different from anything we've even started looking at, but could be visited in the future. And I can talk more about that if anyone is interested. Other than that, we did not recommend specific questions. We gave sample questions that could be used. We are recommending that another task force actually works on the specific questions that would be used. We did have some ideas of what they might look like, but we didn't specifically recommend a set of questions that we think should go to everybody. Some of the other things that have been recommended by other institutions are removing the hold on grades and things like that. That's probably wise, especially considering the use of Moodle here and things like that. But that's sort of the bulk of it. Kristen, do you have anything that you thought I left out?
I think the kind of reasoning we had behind this reflection that takes into consideration student feedback is we're worried that it inhibits innovation in the classroom or trying something different. If you're so concerned that if you change something, your one item measure of your teaching effectiveness is going to go poorly. And so we're hoping that by having this reflection, we can sort of say like, okay, I tried something different this quarter, here's how it went. And it gives us more of an opportunity not to kind of fear changing things up when it's right to change things up based on a one item measure.
Brittany, do you have anything you want to add?
So the student's perspective is a little difficult when certain students obviously have different opinions on course evaluation. Some are, I don't want the hold, I don't even care about them, and others I've met and I've encountered are very passionate about them and they wait the whole term for the course evaluation because they feel that's their chance to like really put it on paper and tell you like I was not satisfied with this or like this was amazing. And so I personally am one that like really was pushing like for next year to have a task force to really evaluate new questions because I think a part of this that I really did enjoy was the reflection piece because as we discussed like at the very first meeting, the rating on effectiveness, I know on the student side, we had no idea that question was the only one that mattered for you guys. And I don't even know what that means necessarily. And I was like, probably a 7, probably a 6, I don't know. It's not a very clear question. Even though we're young academics, I don't know, but it wasn't clear to us. So I think the reflection piece is really good because it's about the whole course evaluation, because I know the chunk of mine are always those two open-ended ones that I can actually write what I liked about the class or problems that I encountered. And so I think just actually reflecting on the students' course evaluations and more open-ended questions so you can actually write it, and I'm not deciding if it's a 5 or a 4 for the class that I took. I also know that some students, while they don't like the hold, if it's open like a little bit earlier, like even opening it like week 7 or something so they have some time, they'll do it more, and we've already kind of been through a chunk of the class, so that might take away also like they don't do good on their final and then they write their course evaluation when they're angry that they didn't do good on their final and those sides of the worries. So I personally like this proposal. I like it with the idea of like the reflection and you get to reflect on our voices and our voices will be heard through a reflection piece, but also I think reevaluating the questions would be really helpful for both ends of the spectrum. So yeah, that's my perspective.
So, thanks, Brittany. But I thought I read in there like the atrocious response rate for students to actually evaluate. It's good to know perhaps why students are or why they're not quickly, but one of the questions when I look at student evaluations, the qualitative, maybe it's not a big enough box, I don't know, but some of it's brief, some of it's long, and so my only concern really is if we make it all qualitative, what would that do to the response rate from the students? Because if they just pick a number, it takes 4 seconds, and I'm not saying that's accurate, and we obviously know it's not accurate, but a lot of the, if it's only qualitative, would that increase or decrease their ability to evaluate? Yeah.
I think that's why U of O is trying to have as much as possible
In the class.
professors give class time for it.
So they don't give
So-
it extra time outside of class.
It's not electronic, it would be on,
It
or,
is still electronic, so I think they were gonna have it be like, if they missed class that day, they could still do it online, you know, or if they don't have a device that's connected that day, they could still do it outside of class, but they would be given a little chunk of time in class. At least that's what Donna heard at the most recent IFS meeting, that they were trying to encourage people to give class time to do that.
Jenny?
I think the idea of having some reflection be part of the process is a really great idea. I was wondering if that was something that was brought up in the context of the FPAR, if that could be built into the FPAR, because I'm hearing, I love everything that you all said and I read the report, but there's a lot of pieces to it. And I know that we struggle to find time, we struggle to find people to do things. You're thinking about adding more peer evaluation is terrific. But again, I'm thinking back to our colleagues in education who are troubled by the thought of having to do some additional, just because of the volume of the instructional what's the word I'm looking for, cadre, we'll say in education. So I'm wondering if some of these things can be streamlined a little bit to try and make them more efficient going forward. And the FPAR task force may want to talk to the student evaluation task force and, you know, so.
Sure, yeah, the reflection was, the idea was it would really be about the student feedback, and the reflection, the FPAR is a little bit different, but I certainly see that those could be
Well, they're
more
key to
similar.
expectations, and at some point, the expectations are gonna have to be addressed. And that will have to happen quickly, because the expectations are directly related to the evaluations. So it's actually, I think, a really nice integration of different aspects of that whole process that should happen all at once, so that one wouldn't go out in front of the other.
Ken?
I was wondering, is there any way to address classes where you have multiple instructors in the same class? Because right now it seems like it goes to the instructor of record, and you have 2 or 3 people teaching a class, and it only reflects, so it goes just to that person who was the instructor of record. And so if you're teaching a class that is 3 of you, and it's a brand new class, and you're introducing all these new concepts, and all of a sudden the 3 people answer the evaluation, and it just all comes back negative, and it just goes back to that one instructor. It just doesn't reflect, the other people that were in there and all the other components. So right now, and I think I'm correct in this. It goes to the instructor of record, even if 2 or 3 people were teaching the class. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have 14 supervisors that do the field supervision, and I'm the instructor of record for all of them. So when the students fill out their evaluation, they're thinking about the person who was their field supervisor.
Yeah.
But it comes to
Yeah.
So
That
that's
seems
an
like a
issue.
question for
Yeah.
Matt,
Yeah.
maybe.
That's not a question for Matt, that's a question for how the class is loaded. I mean, if you are co-teaching the class and you have one instructor of record, there's a loading problem there.
Yeah.
So that's not an evaluation issue, that
Okay.
needs to be, that's a scheduling and loading concern.
Yeah, I think that would be like a scheduling, because I had a class recently that had 2 co-teachers, and I filled out a separate course evaluation for both teachers.
Oh, good, okay.
Yeah, and it was, each question was separate, and it was just 2 different ones.
Okay, great. That's good enough.
Any other comments?
First, I wanted to thank the task force because they did a very thorough job. It made our work easier. The one question that you posed as a possible question that I thought was really important is, what did you do? This is addressed to students, so I want to see the students' response. Or could you have done to support your success in this course? I think that's really a missing little piece of information, because before it was always like, did you learn anything in here? And they're like, didn't learn a damn thing, But so it's obviously because it was your fault. I'm not saying that's what happens, but so to have them do some self-reflection on, did I put in the effort? Could I have done something different, or could these resources have been used more effectively by me? I think that's useful learning for the student coming out of the course, and isn't that what it's kind of about?
On that note, I seem to remember, once upon a time in a course evaluation, when I was a student, I was asked how many hours outside of class I put into studying. And that's something my students regularly get wrong when I ask them how many they're supposed to be.
Right.
And so having them admit that before they go in and talk about us would be something that kind of brings them back to reality a little bit, including a question like that.
And concern is, logistically, if you have a very large class, am I gonna read 175 student, let's assume they all filled out. Maybe I don't have to worry about that, maybe it's 27% return or something. Maybe it's not, it's a non-40, but you would like to see as much from all the students, but it becomes kind of a onerous task to go, if they're writing things, if they're just saying, you know, it's fine, good, whatever, that's not very meaningful, but I don't know if you considered that at all, in the reflective part.
Right, I mean, you wouldn't have to comment on what every single student said, but sort of get a consensus view. But, I mean, we felt that, especially looking in the literature, that those large classes tend to be one of the ones, I mean, there's bias against those large classes. I mean, those tend to score lower than the small, you know, intimate setting where the professor, you know, knows you all and has you over to their house and all that stuff. So if you have 150 students, like those classes tend to get lower ratings anyway. So there's already bias against those classes. This would remediate a lot of that. It might mean a little more reading, but hopefully the end result would be so much improved that it would be worth it. I don't know. But yeah, it's an issue.
I was surprised to see the rate of students who thought that we don't take them seriously, that we don't actually do anything about them. And I think that A, we should, and B, we should let the students know that we do care about them.
That goes into the instructions, right? Like saying, like, this is why we do them, this is how we use them. You know, there's also the students who don't think they're really anonymous. They don't know that a third party is actually managing all this, and even if we wanted to find out who wrote it, we can't. I mean, that's actually, Matt said that's actually impossible. You can't ever connect it back to, because it's this third party that anonymizes it. So, just before, sure. Enrique, did you have anything, because you were at a couple of meetings too, did you have anything to add to, you know?
I think what you said, the report is great, so I think.
Thinking about questions in the next stage, maybe a separate batch of questions about teacher. What did the teacher do that was really good and or needs some critique or some you had things to say about, and then also maybe things about class format, or they, you know, if it is a 150-person class and that was the thing the student really had a problem with, so that the teacher who's doing their best with the 150-student class isn't dinged for the fact that it's a 150-student class. They're trying separating out those two questions. Like, was it the fact that it was an online delivery that worked or didn't work for you? Was it the teacher really being, you know, dynamic and creative in how they handled that worked or didn't work for you?
Last thought from Brittany?
Yeah, I think that was something we addressed a lot in the task force, is separating what the teacher did in the course and when you're evaluating, what exactly are you evaluating? And I think that's a big thing with when we're coming up with questions, is it, when we're thinking of these new questions, they have to be more of like telling a student a little bit more so you're not just like guessing. And they're also like, I think mixing it up might be nicer so a student isn't looking at the same thing they've looked at for the past couple of years. And they might actually like, might be refreshing for a student to see that side, that like we do care and we are going to revise the course evaluations to like get more out of you but also give feedback, so that maybe that also helps with they think that we don't, or we, speaking for students, thinking that it isn't like being responded to by professors, that it's like improving course evaluation. So there is an effort to definitely better that question out there.
We do need to move on, but I'm sure we will be coming back to this as we move forward. I think that I agree that probably the FPAR task force should be looking at this, and will probably be a good idea if we all take this report back to our own divisions and programs, and strongly encourage all faculty to take a look. And Brittany, I would love it if you would make a point of sharing it with student government and in the fall get more feedback from students as to what they're thinking about this, and we can look at what needs to be done next, both in terms of bylaws revisions, because of course the evaluation is all tied into bylaws, but also specifically just redesigning the evaluation itself, and that would probably be another task force. So thank you all for your hard work on this.
Very nice.
With that takes us to our last agenda item, a draft charge of the Transforming General Education Task Force. So just some history again. We came in to our very first Senate session back in October, talking about how we kind of generally felt like it was a good time to do this. We tabled the Senate side for a little while Linda handled the professional learning community on general education. So we got their report, and this task force is basically drawing strongly from their recommendations. So the charge that was written here, all these bullets below the charge pretty much come directly from the end of the PLC report, saying that they think these are the steps that SOU should take in terms of tackling the issue of general education reform. That report, which everyone should look at, does not tell the task force what the outcome should be. It's all about, well, what are the procedures that we need to go through as a university to really look at this difficult issue, complicated issue. I know we have talked on advisory council about this for, I think, about the last 3 sessions that we've had. Ed Battistella did come in and talk in depth about maybe some of the sort of conversations that didn't get explicitly in the report, but sort of some of the feelings about the PLC. And we talked a little bit about timeline and what we want to see happen. So we are very hopeful that even though this is, I don't know, week 20, what week are we in? Even though it's late in the term, we would like to get this ideally approved at our final Senate meeting and immediately ask for volunteers, and the advisory council has even agreed to add a special meeting at the end of the term in order to assign the committee, because we think that Sue is interested in possibly a subgroup of the task force, maybe not the entire task force, but a subgroup doing some summer work with a stipend, and then the full task force really hitting in the fall, full speed ahead. And we know it's going to be a lot of work. It's going to be complicated work. It's going to involve a lot more people than just on the task force. It may involve creating subcommittees and certainly reaching out to faculty and students and staff across the university. So it is a complicated task, but now it's time to talk about this. So I hope everybody got a chance to look at the charge and had a chance to maybe talk with others about it. Is there any feedback on the charge as it is currently written?
Well, I've talked to my department colleague who was on this task force, and I asked her if she'd seen this, and she had not, so what we got in the Senate. And she said she didn't think that was the charge of the committee she was on.
It wasn't. This is a charge for a new
committee. For a new committee, okay.
She was on the professional learning committee, which was charged by the president. This is a task force charged by the...
So I guess my question is, can someone identify for me, because I'm not aware of this, what the actual problem is that this task force is trying to address? Like, is there identifiable problem that we see? It seems like everybody sees the problem, but I'm just trying to figure out what the problem is. So what are we addressing? What is this task force going to be addressing? What is the issue? Can somebody speak to that?
Yeah, so I was on the PLC for this as well, and I think we were really particular about not trying to say SOU has a problem, this is how you fix it. I think this is a charge for us to look at general education as it stands. As it stands is a very heavy amount of credits for students.
So as it stands here now?
Correct.
Because that wasn't the charge for PLC.
Correct.
We're not looking
We were
at
just
whether or
looking
not-
at general education across the board and what types of models are out there and what type of opportunities are there if we're rethinking general education. There was a lot of ifs there. But if this task force takes a look at the report and then starts taking a look at general education as it sits now and what the future of general education could be at Southern Oregon University, there are a ton of credits. I mean, when we look at 73 humanities classes and over 40 social science classes and close to 40 science classes, just sustaining that type of volume in programs. And then when we look at credit hours going up in cost based on what we're seeing with tuition increases. So how much is enough and how do we right size it and what exactly should those courses be? These were all questions we grappled with on that PLC. And I imagine this task force is really looking at some of those questions because it's different. You were here during the 90 credit hours, the 9 goals. which then became, you know, the LEAP piece that we're seeing now. And now we're once again saying, is 64 too much? And how do we align with this transferability aspect of what we're seeing with the state and beyond with Interstate Passport? So I think that's kind of where the charge is going. Not so much, oh my gosh, let's blow it up, because it's time, it's been 10 years. As much as there's all these other factors in place as well.
What I'm not hearing is there a role for general education at a liberal arts institution? If there's no role for it, then we probably can move forward pretty quickly with eliminating a lot of general ed. But, so the discussion seems to be more focused on, as you pointed out, Lee, credits, where our students are taking a lot of gen ed. Well, they are at a liberal arts institution, so maybe we don't want to define ourselves that way. I'm not saying we need to go through that process again, but
we do
I
have
don't
a
know.
mission and vision in place. So.
Yeah, and yes, and so I don't know. When I'm reading through these, the task force will, which general ed approaches will attract and retain students. It's very focused on what you just said. Do we have too many credits, which is in some way impeding students from getting through in a certain amount of time? Are we asking too much of our students to be kind of broad thinkers to learn across disciplines that maybe they're not going to even go forward in? Does that not add to anything?
You know, I don't know that that
So-
ever came up in the PLC. I think
No,
some
I'm asking, I'm just
yeah.
looking at these specific charges. So, I don't know. It's still pretty nebulous to me that the 9 might be dense.
Well, some of the things that, Ed came to advisory council last week, we had a pretty spirited discussion. There were a number of things that were considered. One was the number of credits. One thing that we talked about is, should there only be one path through gen ed, or should perhaps we look at what's the difference between gen ed for a high school graduate coming directly into college versus an adult learner who's coming back to school. Looking at experiential learning and things like, I think the conversation that, the phrase that Ed brought up was putting the fun stuff first. That students sometimes feel like they're just getting through some stuff to get to their major, but maybe there's a different way to think about it, integrating some sort of project-based learning and things like that.
Ed also talked about maybe gen ed for a biology major is different than gen ed for a comm major.
So there's no discussion in our meeting about let's get rid of liberal arts, or let's we don't need gen ed. I think the question is looking at the PLC brought forward a number of very specific models that are being done. We're kind of in one version or a hybrid between a couple, and but there's others out there, and we want to look at, is ours the right model for us or not? Those kinds of things.
Okay. And the membership, so you said, I think I heard you say, Andrew, that the task force will be formed. It says on the back of your membership, the faculty senate will appoint one faculty member from each division. But I heard you say the advisory council you would call for?
The intention was the advisory council could act on behalf of the Senate to appoint those people.
So does that mean you're going to put out, are you
Right.
thinking of putting on a call like you did for the other task force?
Exactly.
Just,
So
make sure you
ideally
have
that we would
representation.
you'd have 2 weeks to bring this back to your constituencies and hopefully have a vote in the last Senate meeting. Ideally, as people are reviewing this material, people are already thinking about volunteering, so that when I put out a call, they're not hearing about it for the first time, but people have looked at this and thought, yes, I'd like to be involved. And then the advisory council would look at, again, one person from each division, and then kind of see what people come forward and try to put together a dynamic.
So it could be one of the people that already served on the original PLC.
It could be.
Because those people are very interested.
Absolutely. We had a discussion about both the PLC and also there's already University Studies Committee, but we didn't want to duplicate either of those.
Right.
We do want to bring some new voices, but we certainly expect there will probably be some crossover between each of those bodies as well. But we do want to sort of bring some new blood to it as well.
Right.
Any other questions or concerns about the text itself, about the way it's written, or bullets that alarm you, or anything that we think we should fix now before everyone on campus looks at it?
I think we should just all agree that we don't need to make any substantial changes for 3 more years.
Someone
That
retiring?
wouldn't be tied to anything in particular, with it like your retirement.
Actually, I guess volunteering.
So,
That would be done in 3 years.
I think when you say things like assess the effectiveness of something, saying, looking at data, you need to say, how are you gonna actually, I mean, what, that doesn't mean anything to me, but that could again just be me, like, what's the effectiveness of general ed? How are you measuring that? I guess I need to understand if there was some metric in somebody's mind that.
Sure, and that sentence came directly out of the PLC report.
Yeah.
My feeling was that they and I copied them, and that did not want to over-prescribe to this task force how to execute the charge. They wanted to give them some latitude to figure out the best way to do those things. So, you know, I guess we can go for more specifics, but I kind of feel like we need to trust the task force once they're.
Well, these all sound very specific to me, so I would say, I interpret it totally opposite of you. That they were not trying to be, I mean, it says, the task force will assess the effectiveness of general education. It's like, okay, how do you go about doing that? I mean, so I would think their knowledge, what they gathered from the PLC would have informed them of what they meant by that, so.
But this is going to be a different group.
I know, but they were reviewing all the literature and looking at other models, you said.
No, we have a huge Google document
Right.
folder.
Maybe you add some language that says identify means of and assess.
Yeah.
Just to address Carol's concern. Restrict the charge any further.
There. Identify means and assess the effect. Any other notes on that? All right, well, if thoughts come to you, and you know, they are things that perhaps can be added or edited before the next Senate meeting, I'm happy to entertain suggestions to the language. Nothing in here is anything I'm married to, but I just tried to do my best to kind of boil down what the PLC said and make it something that's actionable. Also take a look at the ex officio membership. It is large, but we wanted to make sure we brought in a lot of non-faculty voices that have relevant perspectives to the table as well. With that, do we have any announcements or new business? Something's happening on a mountain or river somewhere.
Well, so we have students right now completing their Hawaii trip, a 9-day trip out there, and then we have students that are finishing up their San Juan trip and the islands over there, sea kayaking, and yeah, we're doing great.
International Studies has an international film festival going on tomorrow and Wednesday. So there'll be a German and a French movie tomorrow, and on Wednesday, Japanese and Spanish. So if you could let your students know, maybe you saw it on the
front, the rotating thing.
Yeah.
I'll mention 2 events that we have going on Wednesday the 29th. The Digital Media Film Club is hosting a Digital Media Center Expo at the Digital Media Center. There's going to be equipment demonstrations, workshops, a live script reading competition, some other things. I think some panels of experts and speakers and things like that. And then the next day, on the 30th at 6 p.m. at the Varsity Theater is our annual SOU Student Film Festival. So that will, the tickets will be at the door for $5.
What day did you just
What
say?
day?
May 30th.
Both of those dates?
May 29th is the expo, May 30th is the student film festival.
I'll just give a plug out for the theater department. They got some cool plays coming up.
Yeah.
And just remember, you get to go for free. I didn't know that for a while. And
Yeah.
you get to have another person go with you. So anyway, they got some cool stuff coming up this week.
Or you can pay.
Or you can pay too.
So what?
It's great stuff. It's great, yeah.
Am I on the FPAR task course?
Yes.
Okay, so your FPARs are due May 31st. When you have problems or issues, send them to Anna.
I will compile them and put them in a, send them back.
So as we get ready to adjourn, just a reminder that now we do have the task forces mostly formed. The FPAR's done. The post tenure post promotion one. I think I'm waiting on some updates about the professional track, people who wanted to be involved and if they got approval. But again, we had earlier conversations about these topics, and if you've had conversations with your colleagues in your own divisions and programs, you can forward them on to me, and I will pass along that feedback to those committees as well.
Just real quick on the process for that, the post tenure, the professional doc team member information. So we're trying to create a shared drive where the directors can actually load just the directors into a spreadsheet of some sort, the request by division.
Okay.
So it's actually almost done. And then they'll start doing that, we've got a couple of tabs, and then we can get that information out. So that's the little team.
Cool. Thank you all.